The bells were ringing when I woke. Slow, distant, hollow. For a moment I thought they were calling for a wedding. Ours, perhaps. But then I remembered. Our wedding had been a secret. A whispered vow beneath candlelight and the stars that swore to keep it. I rose too quickly. My body still weak from the fever, but my heart is already racing toward the courtyard. Because someone was shouting his name. Arthur, the Duke of Greyhaven. My husband. He was alive. They said he had survived the carriage accident that had torn through the cliffs 2 nights ago. I didn't wait to think. I ran barefoot through the corridors, past startled servants, my nightgown catching at my ankles. And when I saw him, the world stilled. He stood there, sunlight breaking across his shoulders like a benediction. Not a single scratch on his skin. Alive, breathing, whole, my Arthur. I whispered his name, trembling. Arthur! His gaze lifted to me, blue-gray eyes familiar as home, and yet empty. He looked at me as though I were a stranger who'd spoken out of turn. There was no flicker of recognition, no soft smile he used to wear just for me. Do I know you, my lady? That was the moment I died. The doctors said the accident had taken his memory. The court whispered that the Duke had forgotten his mistress. They never knew the truth, that I was his wife, his secret bride, and now I was no one. Greyhaven felt different the moment I returned. The air was colder, the corridors quieter. Once this estate had been my sanctuary, every marble column and candlelit hall filled with laughter, warmth, and his voice calling my name. Now, it was an echo chamber of memories that no longer belonged to me. They introduced me to him again. Not as his wife, but as Lady Selene Petrova, a distant friend of the late Duchess. It was the only lie I could live within. After all, who would believe that the Duke had secretly married the woman he now could not remember? I curtsied when he entered the room, just as etiquette demanded. He gave a polite nod, nothing more, but his eyes lingered just a little too long. At dinner, he asked about the gardens. I told him I remembered the roses blooming early that year, forgetting, too late, that only we had known that. He paused, brow furrowing, as though something inside him stirred, and then dismissed it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The servants watched me, some with pity, others with suspicion. But a few, the old ones who had served the Greyhaven family for years, looked at me like they almost remembered, too. It was one of them, a young maid named Clara, who found me standing in the music room one night, staring at the piano. "You used to play," she said softly. Before everything." I didn't ask what she meant. Instead, I sat down and let my fingers drift across the keys. The melody that came wasn't planned, it was instinct memory. A song Arthur used to hum when the world grew quiet, and somewhere beyond the doorway, I heard footsteps pause. When I looked up, he was standing there. His hand rested against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. "You play beautifully," he said. "As though you've known this piece for years." I smiled faintly. "Perhaps I have." He tilted his head, the faintest crease forming between his brows, that same thoughtful look he used to wear when trying to remember the words of an old poem. But then his advisor appeared behind him, clearing his throat. And just like that, the fragile moment shattered. I spent the following days moving like a ghost through the halls of Greyhaven, learning faces, relearning silences. Every step, every polite smile was a blade against my chest. The Duke was kind, too kind. He treated me with courtesy, with respect, but no warmth. No recognition of the woman he'd once held close enough to promise forever. And yet, sometimes, I'd catch him watching me. Not with desire, not with suspicion, but something quieter. A pull he couldn't name. As if his heart remembered what his mind could not. Every night I would whisper the same prayer before sleep. "Remember me, Arthur, please remember me." And somewhere in that great lonely manor, I thought I heard an answer. Not in words, but in heart. Days turned to weeks. Greyhaven began to turn warmer, not because the winter was ending, but because I was learning how to breathe again within its walls. The servants had stopped whispering when I entered a room. Clara now smiled openly, bringing me tea in the mornings and news from the market. Through her, I began to hear things, murmurs that never reached the Duke's study. A councilman dismissed, an account ledger missing pages. Letters sent to an estate on the southern border, sealed with a crest that should have been destroyed years ago. Lord Marcus Veilheart, Arthur's most trusted advisor, the man who had overseen the investigation after the accident. The same man who had encouraged Arthur to let go of painful memories. The same man who now watched me too closely across the dining table. Something in my gut twisted. Because the book of our past, the one only Arthur and I had written, still had a few unfinished chapters. One evening, as the rain fell against the stained glass windows, I found Arthur alone in his study. He was bent over a sketchbook, ink staining his fingertips. When he looked up, I froze. It was my face. Drawn with exquisite care, every curve, every shadow, and yet unfinished, as though he'd stopped the moment doubt crept in. I'm sorry, he murmured. I can't seem to remember her, but she haunts my dreams. My heart stuttered. Maybe she's someone you once loved, I said softly. His gaze met mine. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Perhaps, he whispered. But if I did, why does it hurt so much? I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream the truth, throw my wedding ring onto the desk and make him see. But one look at him, at the pain shadowing his eyes, silenced me. He wasn't ready to remember. And if the conspiracy I feared was true, forcing his memory could kill him. So I smiled instead, gently closing the sketchbook. Sometimes, I said, the heart remembers what the mind cannot. The next morning, a letter arrived, unsigned, sealed with the crest of Greyhaven. Inside, only 6 words. He must never know the truth. That night, I could barely sleep. The storm outside grew violent, thunder shaking the windows, and in its roar I heard echoes, our laughter, our vows, our love defying the world. And deep down I knew. His accident had not been fate, it had been planned. By those who feared what he and I had built together, love without permission, loyalty without bloodlines. If the truth lived only in my memory, then I would guard it. Even if it meant becoming a stranger forever. But fate, it seemed, was not done testing us. Because the very next day, Arthur found a letter. Not mine, not his. A half-burned page from a journal, my handwriting, unmistakable, and his name written at the top. He read it once. Twice, and then his hand trembled. The days that followed were a study in silence. Arthur grew restless, distracted. The letter he had found still haunted him. He kept it in his coat pocket, folded so tightly that the edges had worn soft. I caught him once, standing in the garden with the note in his hands, staring at the fountain where we had first kissed. He didn't know why that place called to him, but it did. He looked up as I approached. "Tell me something, Lady Selene," he said, voice low. "Before the accident, what kind of man was I?" I hesitated, because how could I answer that? He had been many things: proud, kind, impossible, beautiful. A man who loved fiercely and without apology. "You were devoted," I said carefully, "to your people, to those you loved." His eyes softened, but only for a moment. "And now, I whispered, "you're still that man, you've only forgotten why." That evening, I was in the library when I overheard them, Lord Marcus Veilhart and the steward, speaking in hushed tones by the fire. The words accident, carriage, and sealed order cut through the quiet like knives. I moved closer, every heartbeat a thunderclap. "His Grace must never remember," Marcus said. "If he does, the treaty fails. The council cannot afford another scandal tied to that marriage." My blood froze. He knew, he had always known. When I stepped back, the floor creaked. Their heads turned. "Lady Selene," Marcus said smoothly, smile razor-sharp, "you have quite the habit of appearing where you shouldn't." "I might say the same, my lord," I replied, forcing calm. "Conspiracies sound awfully bold when whispered beside royal property." He chuckled, all silk and poison. "Careful, my lady. Greyhaven keeps secrets best when they stay buried." I left before my shaking hands betrayed me. But that night I went to Arthur. He was writing by lamplight, ink smudged across his wrist. "Your Grace," I said, stepping closer, "you need to see this." And I told him everything about Marcus, the conversations, the forged reports, the whispers that the carriage wheels had been tampered with. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared into the fire. Then finally, "You're asking me to believe that my own advisor tried to kill me." "I'm asking you to believe your heart," I said softly, "because it already knows who you can trust." Our eyes met, and for the first time I saw it. A flicker, recognition, fragile and fleeting like the ghost of a memory that refused to stay buried. He reached for my hand, then stopped halfway, as though instinct warred with reason. "If what you say is true," he murmured, "then the council's corruption runs deeper than I imagined." "It is true," I whispered, "and I can prove it." By dawn, we were already in motion. Letters were intercepted, ledgers copied. Servants bribed for silence. Every piece led back to the same hand, Lord Marcus Veilheart. Arthur confronted him 3 nights later in the great hall lit only by moonlight. The confrontation was quiet, deadly quiet. Marcus smiled like a man certain of his power. "You'll ruin yourself chasing phantoms, your grace." "Perhaps," Arthur said, stepping closer. "But phantoms don't leave ledgers signed in their own hand." He threw the evidence onto the marble floor. The seal of Greyhaven gleamed faintly in the light. Marcus's mask cracked, only for a moment. Then came the cold, controlled fury. "Do you even know who's standing beside you?" he hissed, eyes darting toward me. "That woman," Arthur cut him off, voice sharp as tempered steel. "Enough!" For a heartbeat, it felt like the world held its breath again, that same stillness from the day of the accident. Then Marcus fled, his guards scattering into the night. Arthur turned to me slowly. His hand was trembling. "Selene," he said, just my name, but this time it carried weight, meaning, memory trying to claw its way free. I wanted to believe he'd remembered everything. But all he said was, "Stay close to me. Whatever comes next, we face it together." And in that moment, it was enough. The storm began long before the rain. Rumors had already slithered through Greyhaven's corridors, whispers of the widow who never was, the lady too close to her duke. By the time the council convened, their decision was made long before the evidence was heard. Lord Marcus Veilheart, cornered, furious, desperate, made his move. He entered the hall with a single folded parchment in his hand. "The Duke's supposed accident was tragic," he said to the gathered nobles, his tone solemn and serpentine. "But what followed was worse, a deception against the crown itself." He turned, eyes sharp as daggers. He pointed at me. "She deceived his grace, pretended to be his wife, forged documents, manipulated his mind while he was vulnerable." A wave of gasps. Air thickened, suffocating. Arthur rose from his seat, fury rippling beneath his calm exterior. "You overstep, Marcus." "Do I?" Veilheart's smile was poison. "Then perhaps his grace can explain why her signature appears here." He unfurled the parchment, our marriage license, half-burned, stolen from my chamber. The wax seal of Greyhaven melted and broken. The crowd roared. My heart stopped. Marcus's voice was cold and triumphant. "She married you in secret, no witnesses, no royal consent. A betrayal of station and law. This," he held up the charred letter, "is her confession." Guards moved in. Arthur stepped forward, but hesitation flickered. The council's eyes were on him. They expected their duke to choose duty over sentiment. And he almost did, almost, because the moment he turned toward me, something broke. He saw not the lady they whispered about, nor the stranger who haunted his steps. He saw flashes, moonlight on a veil, vows whispered by candlelight, my hand in his trembling with laughter and tears. Pain seared through his head. He stumbled, clutching his temple. "Arthur!" I cried, trying to reach him. Guards restrained me, their grips cold and merciless. And then the letter, that damned half-burned parchment, slipped from Marcus's hand and fell into the fire pit at the center of the hall. Flames consumed it greedily, gold devouring ink, light devouring lies. Arthur stared at it, and as it burned, so did the fog inside his mind. Images poured through him, our wedding beneath the chapel arch, the scent of lilac in my hair, the way he'd whispered, "Selene, even death couldn't make me forget you." He gasped, as if breathing for the first time in years. Then his gaze met mine, and this time it truly knew me. "Selene," his voice broke. "My wife." The council fell silent. Marcus's smirk faltered. Arthur strode forward, every inch the Duke of Greyhaven reborn. "You tried to erase her," he said, voice like thunder. "But love is not a ledger you can burn." He took my hand, publicly, defiantly, and faced the court. "This woman is my duchess, my heart, my truth. Any who deny it shall answer to me." The room erupted, shock. Outrage, but I only saw him. The man I had loved, lost, and found again in the ashes. Marcus tried to speak, but the Duke silenced him with one look. "Guards," Arthur said quietly, "take him away." And for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I could breathe. He turned to me, cupping my face gently, almost disbelievingly. "I remember everything," he whispered. "Every heartbeat, every word. I never stopped loving you, I only forgot how to find you." Tears blurred my vision. "Then remember me again," I whispered back. "Forever this time." And he did. The palace had never been so quiet. No shouts, no clatter of boots, no whisper of gossip, only the steady crackle of the torches along the corridor. The silence after chaos always felt heavier than noise. It pressed against my ribs, made every breath too loud. Marcus Veilhart was gone. The guards had dragged him through the marble hall while courtiers stared in horrified fascination, mouths parted like painted masks. One betrayal unmasked, a dozen more yet to come, but for tonight, the kingdom slept beneath the weight of revelation. And I stood by the window of my chamber, watching the storm roll away. The moon broke through the clouds, pale and indifferent. Greyhaven's towers gleamed wet with rain, as if the whole estate had been baptized in fire and water both. My reflection on the glass looked unfamiliar, a woman stripped of all pretense, the last shards of fear still clinging to her eyes. He had said, "This woman is my duchess." Even now, the words echoed like a heartbeat in my chest. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow, like the sea after a tempest, calm on the surface, wreckage beneath. A soft knock at the door broke the stillness. Only one man in Greyhaven would dare knock so quietly. Selene. His voice was low, uncertain, as if he feared the walls might crumble if he spoke too loud. "Come in," I managed, though my throat ached. The door opened. Arthur stepped inside, dressed still in the remnants of ceremony, the dark velvet coat unbuttoned, the crest of Greyhaven faintly visible in the candlelight. His hair was damp from the rain, a stray lock clung to his temple. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air felt alive, fragile. "I thought you retired hours ago," I said, because I couldn't think of anything else to fill the space. "I couldn't," he replied quietly. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw you in that hall, standing there while the truth finally found me." He crossed the room slowly, stopping a few paces away. Close enough for me to feel the warmth of him, yet far enough that a breath could still be a wall. "I remember more with each moment," he said. "Fragments, a laugh in the garden, your hand covered in paint because you refused to wear gloves, the way you said my name like a promise." My pulse quickened. "And what else?" "That I failed you." His voice broke slightly. "That I made you live as a ghost in your own home. You didn't choose to forget." "No," he whispered, "but I chose to listen to those who told me forgetting was mercy." The candle nearest to us flickered, a single bead of wax running down its side. The light caught the silver in his eyes, and for a heartbeat, I saw the man I once vowed to love, not the Duke, not the memory, but the soul beneath it all. "I wanted to hate you," I confessed. "When you looked at me and saw nothing, I thought my heart would stop. But then you smiled at me once, over tea you didn't remember we shared every morning, and I knew I never could." He stepped closer. "Selene." "Don't," I said softly. "Not yet. Let me breathe before you take the air away again." He froze, then nodded. "As you wish." Silence stretched, thin and trembling. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the hills, distant now, a ghost of the storm that had raged earlier. "I keep thinking," I murmured, "how strange it is that we survived. You, me, this love that refuses to die even when the world insists it should." Arthur's expression softened. "Perhaps love is simply stubbornness given purpose." A small, broken laugh escaped me. "Then we are the most stubborn people alive." He smiled, truly smiled, and it felt like sunrise. But behind that light was still shadow. "Marcus won't be the last," I said. "His allies will crawl out of every corner once they realize he's fallen." "I know," Arthur replied. "I've already sent word to the council, but tonight—" He looked at me as if measuring the weight of every word. "Tonight I wanted to see you, just you." The simplicity of it undid me. For months, I had lived among ghosts. Now one of them was reaching back with human hands. I turned toward the window again, needing the distance, needing to see the moon just once more before I forgot how. "Do you remember?" I asked. "The night we planted the white roses in the East Garden?" His answer was immediate. "I remember your hair smelled like rain." My breath caught, the first true memory unprompted, vivid, alive. When I looked back, his eyes were bright with something raw. "Selene," he said softly, "they told me memory fades like ink, but yours burned through everything they tried to hide." Took another step. The space between us vanished. The last inch between us disappeared as if it had only ever been imagined. I could feel the warmth from his coat, the faint scent of rain and cedar clinging to him. He lifted a hand, stopped midway, uncertain, then let his fingers trace the air near my cheek, a gesture half memory, half apology. "I keep thinking," he murmured, "if I'd only reached for you then as I do now, none of this would have happened." "You did," I whispered. "Once, 100 times. But every story ends somewhere, Arthur. Ours just refused to stay buried." The fire popped in the hearth, throwing embers like fleeting stars. He looked down at them, jaw tight. "Marcus told me the accident was fate, that I was lucky to have survived." He lied. I know that now, but when I woke, there was a hole in my mind, and he filled it with poison. "Poison can be washed away," I said. "It just takes time and truth." He met my eyes. "Then give me truth." The request landed between us like a vow. So I told him everything. The secret vows whispered in the chapel, the way he'd hidden the ring inside a book of poetry, the night we decided to wait until peace returned before announcing our marriage. I told him of the accident, of how I found his carriage broken on the cliff road, and how Marcus stood at the edge too soon, too calm. Every word tasted like smoke and salt. By the end, Arthur's hands were clenched at his sides. "He will answer for it before the council," he said quietly. "Let the council have him," I replied. "We've already paid the price." He looked at me as if seeing both the past and the future. "Selene," he said, voice rough, "I remember flashes now, the vow, the candlelight. You laughing in the garden. But more than anything, I remember the feeling that I was home." My heart stuttered. "You are home." He reached up then, and this time he didn't stop. His fingers brushed the tears I hadn't realized had fallen. The touch was gentle, reverent, as though he feared I might vanish again. "I thought I'd forgotten you," he whispered, "but I think what I truly forgot was myself." We stood there until the fire burned low, the world reduced to the rhythm of breath and heartbeat. Outside, the rain had stopped. The night air smelled of wet earth and roses. Arthur exhaled. "Tomorrow there will be questions. The nobles will demand explanations. They'll want me to prove every word." "Then we prove it," I said, "together." He gave a quiet laugh, half disbelief, half wonder. "You sound like the woman who once dared me to chase the sunrise." "She caught it," I said softly. "It just took her a little longer to bring it back." He tilted his head, eyes shining with tired amusement. "And what does the sunrise look like now?" "Like forgiveness," I answered. For a long while, we said nothing more. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, of all we'd lost and all that still remained. Finally, he reached for the small velvet pouch around his neck and drew out something I hadn't seen since before the accident. Our rings, both of them still tied together with a ribbon that had once been white. "I couldn't remember what they meant," he said, "but I kept them close. Now I think I know why." He placed the ribbon in my palm. The metal was warm from his skin. "Tomorrow," he continued, "we'll tell the world what they are. Tonight, let's just remember who we were." The clock struck midnight, its chime soft and deep. Outside the window, the clouds parted and the moonlight spilled across the room, silvering the floorboards, our hands, our faces. For the first time in what felt like centuries, I didn't flinch from the light. When the first light came, it crept softly through the drapes, pale and hesitant, like the morning itself feared to intrude. I hadn't slept, neither had Arthur. We sat before the dying fire, shoulders touching but not yet entwined, as if both of us were afraid that too much closeness might shatter the fragile calm that had finally settled between us. Greyhaven was never quiet. Even in its slumber, the manor breathed creaks in the wood, wind against the old stone, the faint, distant clang of the blacksmith's bell from the village. But that morning, the silence felt different, expectant. Arthur leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gaze lost in the embers. I used to dream of this place, he said softly. I thought it was home because of its name, Greyhaven, a haven, but now I realize it was you. You made it that. My throat tightened. You're only saying that because you're remembering me through rose-colored fragments. He shook his head. No, even when I couldn't remember your face, I remembered the ache, the sense that something vital was missing, like a melody that ends mid-note. I smiled faintly, and now the song is whole again. The window fogged faintly with the warmth of the hearth. Through it, I could see the estate gardens waking, dew glittering on the roses, mist curling around the marble statues. The same gardens where we'd once stolen afternoons and secrets. Arthur turned to me, his expression half resolute, half vulnerable. Marcus Veilhart won't get far. The guard captain already has his orders. But even when he's gone, the whispers will remain. They'll question you, question us. Then let them, I said, standing. We have nothing to hide now. I walked to the window, drawing the curtains wide. The light poured in golden, unfiltered, almost blinding after so much shadow. Behind me, I heard him rise, footsteps slow and measured. Selene, he said. My name sounded different on his lips now, not a question, not a memory, but an answer. I turned, and for the first time since the accident, I saw the man I had loved, not the haunted Duke, not the stranger, but the one who once made even moonlight seem jealous. He came to stand beside me, his hand finding mine naturally, instinctively. The world outside was beginning to stir, voices from the courtyard, a horse's whinny, the scent of fresh bread from the kitchens below. Life returning to Greyhaven. I remember something else, he said suddenly. The morning after we wed you made me promise that no matter what happened, I'd always greet the dawn with you. I laughed quietly. You said it was a foolish promise. You hate mornings. He smiled, slow and warm. And yet here I am trying to keep it. The light caught on the silver ribbon still tangled in my hand, our rings glinting faintly like twin suns. He reached out, took one ring, and slid it onto my finger once more. His hands trembled, but his voice did not. This time, he said, the world will see it. He kissed my hand, then my brow, lingering just long enough for me to forget the ache that had lived in my chest for months. And for a fleeting, perfect second, I believed we could begin again, not as ghosts of what we once were, but as something new. It took weeks for Greyhaven to quiet. The fire of scandal left its ashes everywhere, whispers in corridors, guilt in letters unsigned, silence in the halls that once brimmed with deceit. But truth has a way of surviving even ruin, and love, real love, rebuilds faster than rumor can destroy. The court that once shunned me now bowed when I entered. They called me Your Grace with cautious reverence, unsure how to address a woman who had walked through disgrace and come out wearing a crown. Arthur stood beside me at every council, every treaty, every dawn. The man who had forgotten me once now remembered everything, and proved it in small, stubborn ways. A hand reaching for mine beneath the council table, a stolen glance across parchment and politics, a bouquet of lilacs placed at my bedside each morning. But the true memory, the truest proof of it all, came one night when the moonlight returned to the chapel. The same one where we had once whispered our vows in secret. Only this time, it was no secret at all. The hall glowed with candlelight and roses white and gold. The guests were few, the silence reverent. Arthur waited for me at the altar, his hair catching the silver of the moon, his eyes soft in a way that only love could make dangerous. The world will tell our story as they please, tragedy turned fairy tale, the villainess redeemed, the Duke reborn. But between us, we know the truth. We were never lost, only waiting to be found. As the moonlight spills through the chapel window, I rest my head against his chest and whisper. We made it, Arthur. He presses a kiss to my hair. No, my love, he murmurs, smiling. We remade it. And somewhere in the quiet between heartbeats, the golden roses bloom once more. Epilogue. They say Greyhaven blooms differently now. The roses no longer bleed red. They shimmer gold. The color of sunrise, of beginnings that refuse to die. It's been a year since the world learned my name. Not as scandal, not as shadow, but as the Duchess who refused to be forgotten. Arthur stands beside me now, not the Duke the court once feared, but the man who rebuilt his heart brick by brick. Sometimes he laughs mid-sentence, as if still astonished that we survived the story written to end in tragedy. At dawn, he always turns to the east. At dusk, I walk beside him through the garden that remembers us. The golden roses sway, whispering of the love that lived beyond memory. Once he forgot everything, even me. But love remembered for two was enough to bring him home. Now, when people speak of the forgotten Duchess, he only smiles, touches his heart, and says, "She was never forgotten, only waiting." And perhaps that's all any love story truly is. Not about heroes or villains, but about two souls who chose each other, even when the world forgot. Because love remembered once is fate. But love remembered twice.